This is SSCA, the best practices boat insurance, 2025-26, a Caribbean focus with AMG Insurance International Specialist, CEO, Carrie Gonzalez. And we will start in a few minutes, but I'll let you all come in and get seated, get popcorn or whatever. And I'm Joan Conover. I'm president of Seven Seas Cruising Association. And I want to thank Carrie for taking the time to go over this, especially as I believe she's focusing on the Caribbean, but also on catamarans. And there's many of us with catamarans who need just a little few more hints maybe, or find out what's going on in the insurance world right now. And I appreciate you, Carrie, for being here. And I'll just stop for a moment and let some more people come in.
Okay.
This will be recorded. This will be stored on our SSCA YouTube. Everyone who attends and anyone who signed up will get a copy of the slides and get a copy of the video emailed to them to the email address that they registered for or signed up for on the website. So just give us a few minutes to get some more people in here and then we will start the show. This is Seven Seas Cruising Association, and I would like to thank you for attending this webinar. It's a complimentary webinar, and we're covering insurance, boat insurance, specifically with a Caribbean focus, and some discussion on catamarans. Our speaker is AMG Insurance International, Carrie Gonzalez. She also will be the keynote speaker at Melbourne GAM for SSCA, November 14th, 15th, and 16th in Melbourne, Florida this year. So with that, I will go through a little bit of officialness with a disclaimer. The SSCA webinar is provided for information and entertainment purposes. The remarks, opinions, and conclusions are the presenters alone, do not represent the view of SSCA Cruising Association, its officers, directors, members, staff, partners, or sponsors. SSCA does not endorse or oppose any products, service vendors, or insurers mentioned. Any references are for information only. Information may be incomplete or changed without notice. SSCA makes no warranties and accepts no responsibility for errors or omissions. By attending, you agree that SSCA is not liable for any loss, damage, or claims arising from reliance on the session content or any third-party product services discussed. As mentioned, Carrie Gonzalez. Carrie serves as the CEO and marketing director of AMG Insurance International, LLC, a marine insurance brokerage based in West Palm Beach, Florida. She brings over 25 years of experience in marketing and managing insurance exposures across the marine industry. And while she doesn't talk about it a lot, she has done a lot of outreach. She has helped tremendously in many communities. She sponsors Cruisers University. She sponsors training, safety, so many things it's hard to mention them all. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Carrie. I'll drop my share. And Carrie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Joan.
You bring up the share and your screen will come up.
So Joan, I really appreciate that disclaimer you gave. Hopefully you can see my screen now. Can you just give me an affirmative that you can see my screen?
Yes, I see your screen and I hear you just fine. Anyone else out there, you can chat. There's also Q&A. So I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, and there will be questions at the end. And if you have a problem, hit the chat button and I will respond. And Carrie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. So Joan, I'm really appreciative of the fact that you gave that disclaimer in the beginning. It's a great segue to our presentation for tonight. You know, we're famous for giving disclaimers. And if you've ever read an insurance policy, there's more disclaimers in the insurance policy than there is coverage. So I'll start with that. But my disclaimer is also that I'm not an attorney. This is not to be construed as legal advice. If you need advice on insurance matters that are of a legal nature, you should consult with an attorney. If you need insurance matters for a policy that I have not represented you on and do not have your documentation on, you need to consult with your agent. That being said, if you need a second opinion or you need a sounding board, feel free to reach out to me. It's best to schedule a time to talk to me. If you're in the Caribbean, the best way to get on the phone with me is to email me, tell me a few times you're available. We can set up a WhatsApp call or a Teams call so we can see each other and we can screen share, and we'll do our best to help. So we're going to talk specifically about Caribbean boat insurance, but some of this actually applies to boat insurance in general. It's getting harder. We all agree on that. So I want to tell you that we actually thought we were going to have other participants on this call. It's not unlike other webinars we've done. We did one even last week as well. And we do them often, and we often get insurance companies and other agents and large brokerages who should be speaking out about insurance, but they're basically saying, look, legal has shut us down. We are not allowed to speak about what's in the policy. We're so afraid of not giving enough disclaimers about what's in the policy and what's not in the policy. So as you know, an insurance policy gives you the world and then they take it away and then they give you a few things back. So the objective of this webinar is to take you behind the scenes of boat insurance. At the end of this call, will you understand your coverage? Absolutely not. You need to read your policy. You need to be an educated buyer. This is a two-sided contract. Now, you probably have purchased auto insurance or homeowners or renters insurance or some other kind of insurance in the past. And for the most part, those insurance contracts are a one-sided contract. Boat insurance, however, is a two-sided contract, meaning you're agreeing to do certain things as conditions and warranties of your coverage, basically promises to your coverage. We're going to talk about a few of those in this webinar, but I'm going to take you behind the scenes of what they don't tell you about boat insurance. So I want to talk about why we can't talk about it. The industry has changed so drastically. If we rewind history back to Hurricane Irma, I actually had a whiteboard in my office in downtown West Palm Beach where we literally wrote out every yacht or boat insurance company that existed prior to Hurricane Irma. And one by one, they dropped out of the picture. And some of them just closed their capabilities altogether. Some of them left the Caribbean. Some of them just decided they were going to work in a small box. Some of them left Florida. But why can't we talk about it? Because this is a changing world. The insurance industry, the underwriter's appetite, the forms change every time there is a new filing with an insurance commissioner. There is a massive loss. We've seen some losses with lithium in particular that have really driven changes in the industry with respect to lithium. It could be that, they have too much of an aggregate in one area. And I'm going to talk about that as we progress through this. Normally, I do a lot of talking and have a lot more content, but because we're going to talk about the Caribbean, and I've done other webinars related to the Caribbean, especially after Hurricane Beryl came through, where people had so many questions that couldn't be answered, I'm going to make sure we leave enough time for those questions. So, the whole industry has been silenced. In 2019, I led the Super Yacht Insurance Forum for the US Super Yacht Association. We invited 8 insurance companies to come in, or programs to come and represent, their programs with respect to super yachts. It's not any different on smaller boats. When we were getting ready for this, 2 of the players completely dropped out, and every single one of them had a knee-jerk reaction where the legal departments got involved and said, look, we will agree to allow you to participate in this public panel, but if you do, we're going to give you scripted questions and scripted answers. And Joan would tell you that I'm not very good as a scripted person. So it wasn't the greatest presentation because the audience went there wanting to know what they don't want you to know, what they don't tell you. The audience went there wanting to know what's changing, why is it changing, how do I prepare? What do I expect in the future? And unfortunately, they couldn't get a clear answer. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, the things that you should know and that you should look for that no one's going to go out of their way to tell you. Your agent, your insurance company, they're not going out of their way to tell you. And then we'll move on to Caribbean a little later in the presentation. So let's start with this because it's really a foundational conversation. The financial strength and size of your insurance company matters. Can they pay your claim? Marine insurance is not as regulated as other kinds of insurance. They have a lot of manuscripted special forms. And as such, it's very important to know, look, if they have 100 boats in the Caribbean in one place, when a hurricane comes through, are their financials strong enough? Do they have enough policyholder surplus in the bank, not only to pay my claim, but to pay the claims of all those around me that got hit by this hurricane? So where do we find out if they have a good financial rating? We can look at AM Best, Moody's, S&P, Fitch's, and we can also, for those companies who are not yet rated, I'll give you an example a little later in the presentation, you can actually look at their financials. When you look at their financials, you'll get some clues that'll cause you to pause and maybe ask some questions like, is their money coming from China? Is it coming from Russia? Are their funds coming from a place where they may be subject to sanctions? You could also look at their financials and see, do these financials demonstrate that they have a liquidity so that when I file my claim and I haul it into a boatyard, I know that I'm not going to be waiting 8 months for them to liquidate something to pay my claim. We want to see the liquid assets. We want to see their profit and loss statement. If you need any tips on what to look for in their financials, or you need someone to get financials from your insurance provider, please reach out to us. We have a pretty good library of these. So we were talking a little bit earlier about aggregate of risk. This is the concept whereby insurance companies and underwriters track how much they have in asset values in a particular part of the world. So you know that there are players, there are insurance participants in the Caribbean that will reach a certain point where they'll say, as an example, only an example, okay, we have, $50 million of assets in the British Virgin Islands. I'm just throwing this out there. So then they decide partway through their year that they actually have to cap any more new business because they have too much of an aggregate of risk in that area. So they track that. What's behind that? Who funds them? How are they secured? Well, there's this thing called reinsurance. Reinsurance is the investors behind the insurance companies who basically require them to be profitable, to have financial sustainability, and to pay claims. So the reinsurance companies invest in the insurance companies, and then they participate in the financial strength, the financial stability, and the payment of claims. Some companies use their own adjusters for claims. Others use something called a TPA. You need to know when you buy your insurance, is your insurance coming from a company that uses a TPA? TPAs are not bad. If they are reputable, it's something you need to research. A third-party administrator is someone they subcontract to, so they control the process. Your insurance company is not controlling the process. They're taking the recommendations and the authority from the TPA that they have designated to that TPA. In the fine print, going back to the TPA, it's really important, especially in the Caribbean, to know, is my insurance provider paying my claim directly to the yard, to the marina where I had to haul out, to the third party, some other boater that I might have hit? Are they paying it first? Are they paying the contractor? Are they paying for the new engines? Or do I, as a boat owner, have to have enough money in the bank to front that initially? And then do I have to wait for reimbursement? And how long does that reimbursement take? That is so important to know, because after Hurricane Beryl, a lot of boat owners were caught by surprise, learning that they actually had to fund the repairs, the salvage costs, which were astronomical after Hurricane Beryl. And it was really heart-wrenching to watch it, because those expectations were not managed in the beginning. Let's talk about the fine print as it pertains to warranties. So warranties are the things not only in your policy. Do not just confine this to your policy. The warranties sometimes exist in the application you sign. They can exist in other documents you sign where you are representing material facts. If you represent material facts, for example, I say that I'm going to be in Carousel, and then I'm actually not in Carousel, I'm in a better place because I went to Turks and Caicos, or I went, down to Trinidad or Tobago to get away from a storm. Well, you think it's all fine and good. I think it's a much better risk management plan, but unfortunately, there's this warranty in your application. Sometimes it's reflected on the policy as well, but quite often it's on the application. You sign it, and that application says that you have warranted and promised that you will be in a specific place for all named storms between date A and date B on the calendar. And even if you're going to a better place, if you have a claim, and with some providers, it's not even just a storm claim. It could be that you have a claim because someone hit you, or it's someone stole your boat. If you have a claim of any kind at all, and you have voided that warranty, then it's very important for you to realize that this is a two-sided contract that you need to take quite seriously. One of the famous warranties that is getting more publicity, if you will, it's getting more of a flashlight on it, is the warranty in the Concept Special Risks policy. Concept is not the insurance company or syndicate. Concept is the program. They have the authority to underwrite, pay claims, administer changes, billing, etc. But the fire extinguishing and suppression warranty in their policy does not necessarily reflect the requirements of the US Coast Guard or the requirements that exist in the Caribbean with respect to fire extinguishers that are handheld, or fire suppression like a halon system that is in your engine room. So it's important to read that warranty that says you have to annually certify and inspect your fire extinguishing equipment by a professional. I've gone round and round and round with definitions on what that means. But let me tell you, if you're in the Caribbean on your boat and you do not have current tagged equipment, especially the one in the engine room, you have likely voided your coverage, even if you have a claim that is not related to a fire. It's not because you were a good and prudent and perfect risk manager of your boat. It's because you have a two-sided contract. It's a very left brain checkbox. You voided a warranty that was in the contract, and so you may have voided your coverage altogether. The fine print can also say that you're agreeing to all the conditions, terms, and limitations in the policy. If some of you have insurance policies with GIA with a parametric deductible, it means that in the fine print, you may have agreed to a deductible that is based on the Beaufort scale. If you understand the Beaufort scale, as the wind increases in speed, your deductible increases in dollar value until you're paying almost or all of the entire value of your boat. So you think you bought insurance, but if you've signed up for any kind of parametric deductible, I personally would not view that as real insurance. So make sure you read the fine print in your quotes, in your applications, and in your policies. The other thing in the policy that's important to note is jurisdictions. Even though you may have a boat in the Caribbean, a lot of Caribbean markets still have brick and mortar locations in the United States where they have AM Best A rating. Hopefully they're A rated, but they do insurance company filings in the United States as well. So it's important to know where they have filed their jurisdiction for any suits brought against them. If they're filing with a jurisdiction of New York, New York is known to favor insurance companies and syndicates. So it's important to know that going into it and to understand what your rights are. If the jurisdiction says that, all suits will be brought in a foreign land, or maybe it's the UK, which is quite common, it's important to note that you may have to travel for any suit that you initiate or have to respond to. We have spoken in these webinars about a program under the name of Edward Williams that is backed by Ion Insurance. And they actually have these alter ego companies, as a famous Hawaiian claim determined they were using, but they all start with Ion. If you have that program in that form, you may find that your jurisdiction is based in Costa Rica. But even as alarming as that sounds, it's really important to realize that if you're based in Costa Rica on your policy, you may have also signed a warranty that says you're waiving all your rights to arbitration and mediation, and which I put at the bottom here, and suits that you may want to bring against the insurance company. So if they deny your claim, you do not have any rights of appeal because you've now signed this contract that agrees to waive all your rights. Where do I find answers to my questions? So I get a lot of desperate calls. Sometimes they're from yacht owners who have exhausted their options because they haven't told their story correctly. They haven't included everything in the narrative that the insurance agent tells to the underwriters, and have to dig for more details, but it's kind of hard to backpedal. Sometimes they're contacting me because they've read a lot of things online on blogs and they're worried. Sometimes they're contacting me because they've already had a claim, and it may or may not be too late for me to assist with how to appeal that claim. So here are the places where you can rely on information. Let's talk about each one of them. So the application forms a warranty to your policy. You sign the application, and the problem with our industry and technology is the fact that all of us are doing things electronically these days, which means that, if you're pulling the application off your phone and it's in a really tiny font, and you read it and you just scroll through it and you do the electronic signature, you're not really reading it, but you're attesting legally to the fact that you have read and agreed with that application, and all of the material facts that are in that application are in accordance with your understanding. So it's important to go back and read that, because if you ever have to appeal a claim or you have a dispute with your insurance company, the application matters. At the bottom of every single application, there is a section that pertains to wherever you are and wherever you claim your place of domicile is. And that section is a fraud statement about misrepresentation or omission of material facts. So if you say you're a liveaboard, but you don't own a home with a mortgage deed or lease, then all of a sudden you may be guilty of, misrepresenting a material fact. Can you rely on information from other people, which we call the, court of public opinion? So, voters talk at the docks and they talk about, when they don't have a claim that is paid. You can listen to those things, but once again, it's important to go back to the application and the policy to know, okay, was their claim denied simply because they voided their contract or they didn't represent something correctly, or there was some reason? Don't form an opinion without knowing what the application and the policy says. If you are going online on the internet and you happen to search on, and I would encourage you to do so, Edward Williams, Ion Insurance, you'll find they have a tiny office in American Samoa, and they have many lawsuits against them, which are public information. That is not the court of opinion. Those are real places with real cases where people have heartache and loss that matters. So those things you can rely on. You're going to find all kinds of blogs about that particular kind of insurance. And then the other place you can go is your insurance agent or a licensed insurance agent who can actually tell you how the policy reads and what your rights are. I'm going to do this little commercial for SSCA because it really fits with this whole topic of where do we find information about our insurance. So, we use a CRM, customer relationship management system, that actually has AI built into it. But it's really more for the agents to find general information about general insurance. Marine insurance, however, is a very small niche in the industry. It has a two-sided contract. Our insurance rates for professional liability are higher than anyone in the industry. So we actually don't use AI because the problem with getting an answer on boat insurance from AI is it doesn't have the intelligent ability to go out there and look at your application, your supplemental details that you provided to the agent and the insurance company. And it doesn't have the ability to look at your particular policy, which in marine insurance, especially in the Caribbean, is mostly manuscripted. But SSCA does have this AI platform that is so impressive. It'll give you all kinds of information about your boat. But we have made a decision, and most people in the marine insurance industry have made a decision that we are not using AI for opinions on boat insurance because it doesn't have the intelligent ability to pull your specific, very detailed documents into the equation to give you a more accurate answer. Well, let me actually go back to this for a second. SSCA has this HAL system that is really worth diving into and testing it. And I would encourage you also, when you're looking for boat information or information on where you're cruising, to reach out to Joan Conover and give her feedback on this, because it is such an exciting development. So moving on, a lot of folks have catamarans in the Caribbean. And we have been working for over 6 months with some London providers to put together a new Caribbean program in the Caribbean. And this webinar is not to announce who they are or how it will work or what the parameters are, but I'm giving you a sneak preview that this is coming. And we hope to have this in place before the Annapolis Sailboat Show, which is the largest sailboat show in North America. If you're going to that show, we're going to talk about shows coming up. don't forget that we offer continental breakfast for free the Saturday morning of the show, and it's a great place to come and ask your individual questions. But this will specifically be for catamarans. And, one of the challenges in the Caribbean has been dealing with where you can go and dealing with, what the requirements are, including that fire extinguisher issue. So this is me. If you want to apply for boat insurance, one of the things I'm not great at doing is telling people where to apply. If you apply on our website under the boats and yachts section, and you are a better fit for one of the Caribbean only markets, that means you're going to the Caribbean and you are not returning to the United States. So let me rephrase that. If you're going to the Caribbean on your boat and you're leaving your boat there, or you're not bringing your boat back to the United States at all, then there are markets in the Caribbean that we have great knowledge of that we can recommend to you that are ethical. They pay claims. Most of them are rated. They have great brokers. They were voted one of the most ethical brokerages in the world a few years in a row. And if I had a catamaran and I was going to the Caribbean and I was not coming back, I would certainly reach out to them. One of the tips I'll give you, if you do the application and we determine that that's a better fit for you, I'll tell you in advance that you need to be an advocate for yourself, and you need to make sure that you're also asking for uninsured boaters, because often Caribbean markets, the insurance companies and providers behind the agents, they do not want to provide uninsured boaters. There's so many boaters in the Caribbean who don't purchase insurance. It's not, it's required, but it's not enforced as often. And so because of that, make sure that when you look at your quote, you push back and ask for uninsured and underinsured boaters coverage to be built in to the highest limit possible. You do not want to be in a situation where 3 boats are involved in an incident, or one breaks loose during a storm, and then all of a sudden you're the only one with insurance and you're paying out. That's not a great scenario to be in. But if you apply on our website and you're also a better fit for a direct writer, that we do, a captive agent basically is someone we don't represent, that only represents that one company. I'm a firm believer that you can accomplish anything if you don't mind who gets the credit. That was a Truman quote that I live by. And if we get your application and you're a fit for both sides, for the independent agent side, as well as either a Caribbean market or a captive agent, we're going to tell you, look, let's go both directions. And if one of those other options is great, then you still have us as a sounding board. So here's our team. We're going to be in Annapolis for the boat shows. We sponsor Cruisers University. It's a 7-day seminar between the powerboat show and the sailboat show, where you can learn everything from offshore emergency medicine to doing a master diesel mechanic class, all sorts of things. Then you can catch us at the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. We are going to be presenting at the SSCA GAM in Melbourne in November. And we also teach classes to marinas and boatyards, and we will be exhibiting at the Marina Dock Expo. I'm going to put in a quick plug, and then I'm going to open this up for Q&A. My plug is for Hope Fleet. So if you're going to the Caribbean, you may have come across Hope Fleet, but hopefleet.org is where you find their website. It's something we're extremely passionate about. We help a lot of boaters, and when they come back to us and they say, okay, what can we do in return for all the help you've given us? We say, go to Hope Fleet and register for their newsletter. They have a child trafficking newsletter that you can sign up for to be part of the solutions on that. They respond after disasters all over the Caribbean to bring supplies and food and water and medical supplies. They bring toiletry kits, they bring garden buckets. Even if you're just going to the Bahamas, they have partners on the ground in the Bahamas. And why would you go through them instead of just bringing supplies yourself? Well, they have not only vetted partners on the ground, but they've also gone through customs, and they can provide a manifest to customs on your behalf that says everything you have on board so that you don't have any problems when you're coming into the local jurisdiction. Also, they love to have boaters who volunteer to do some of their work projects. They rebuild infrastructure that impacts children. And that's really their focus, is on, responding to children after disasters and preparing them for that and helping to infuse, supplies into those areas. So I'm going to open this up for questions, and I don't know, Joan, how you turn that over, but I'm going to leave our contact information up here and see who has questions.
Well, we have some questions. I would like to go back and mention, hopefully, last year during Hurricane Beryl, between Trinidad's Jesse James, Grenada's Lynn Kayak, and some SSCA cruising hosts. They're all cruising hosts, but those were the key ones. We pulled whole fleet in, and they had 158 boats carrying stuff right and left through the islands. It was like everything was running on WhatsApp and one little WhatsApp, because that's all they had. And we were running water, fluid, food, medicine, you name it, and using came up with the manifest process, and Tim with Hope Fleet was involved in that, and so was Danny. It was the first time they've done that. Now we have our feet wet. Hope Fleet is actually a clean weight project in SSCA. You can find information on them at by ssca.org, that clean weight program. But a wonderful group, wonderful group. So now I'm going to go back and look at some of the questions, Carrie. We have, let's leave the challenge of ensuring older proven boats and look at the questions from first on the fire extinguishers. We have from David Dick. He says he has concept special risk policy and have responded to the life and fire extinguisher issue by purchasing new extinguishers each year and rotating the oldest ones from onboard to home, cottage, and vehicles, and now have about 7 new and newish extinguishers on board. Does that cover the questions he needs?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. I answer it often. And, because I don't know where you're at in the policy year, and the application form changed August 1st this year. It also changed last year. To give you a very specific answer, I would need to see your application and your policy, because the forms have changed. But that being said, let me give it a stab. So the reality is, a lot of people will address handheld fire extinguishers by buying new ones. However, the requirement says that they have to be certified and inspected annually. So if you're buying new ones, you want to make sure that you didn't just throw out the box that has the tag actually inside the box. And you want to make sure that you didn't throw out the receipt that shows when you bought them, because otherwise you are up the creek without a paddle and no alibi. So that's really important. A lot of people throw those out. I would really admonish you to consult with your agent on this issue and be very specific about how you have responded to this requirement, and make sure you get something in writing that says that that is satisfactory, because I don't know where you're at in, when your forms specifically changed, and the wording did change slightly last year and then again on August 1st, just recently. So go back to your agent and get it in writing, because then you have a guarantee. Did I answer that question, or are there any follow-up questions on that? Because it is not a topic I want to skim over, especially because it is very inconvenient, if not impossible, in parts of the Caribbean to comply with this.
Yes, we do have another question. Do the small fire extinguishers need to be inspected by a pro or by the boat owner? I think from what you said, it depends on your policy, but it looks like if it says professional survey or, yeah.
Yeah, so it does, I'm not gonna say yes or no, it depends on which form you have, but most of them actually do require a professional. The challenge I have with the wording, and I've gone around and around on this with professionals in the industry, is that it's very difficult to define professional or expert. So once again, go back to your agent, tell them what you're doing, who's doing it, and get it in writing that that's accepted and approved.
Would the Coast Guard inspect?
Sorry?
My experience with the Coast Guard inspecting our fire extinguishers, I don't think is probably, our boat had taken on water and they came on board and decided to inspect the fire extinguishers and looked at one, it was underwater, and he said, yeah, you got one, that was it. We
Okay,
talked about
but it's
your
important to
fine,
know, Joan, that the Coast Guard used to require this annual certification
Right.
inspection. And this is not a Coast Guard issue. This is a concept issue.
Right.
I'll be the first one to tell you that, you know, insurance policies, forms, and underwriters are often more conservative and not willing to think outside the box more than, you know, a regulatory requirement. So the Coast Guard does not require this. Coast Guard has very specifically written up that, you know, you have to replace your, first of all, if you have kiddie fire extinguishers that have those
Right.
specific types of handles, there's a recall, you can
Recall,
get
yes.
replacements for free. But most fire extinguishers are good for 12 years. So if you're in US waters, or you're with a market that is not, you know, concept, this is not an issue. This is an issue I'm parking on because a lot of people in the Caribbean are in the concept program. And it's not concept insuring you, it's concept underwriting it and administering the program. You may have 7 providers, all with a percentage of the risk on your policy. So once again, because the wording has changed slightly a few times, if you have concept and you're in the Caribbean, go back to your agent, tell them very specifically what you did, and get approval in writing and ask them to, you know, get that conveyed to the underwriters.
Yeah, Gerald Martin has the same question. Who is a qualified professional? That's one of those catch 22s.
So in the United States, you know, the insurance commissioner, if you have a consumer complaint with your insurance, the insurance commissioner will take gray areas that are ambiguous, and they will always side with the consumer if there's a gray, ambiguous area in a policy. But we're not talking about this. We're talking about concept, which is underwritten by Lloyd's of London syndicates, and there are reinsurance companies behind it. So, you know, they're really going to base it on a two-sided contract and whatever you have in writing. So you don't even want to rely on a verbal from your agent. You want to get it in writing that what you have done with your fire extinguishers is acceptable and it's approved by underwriting.
You know,
So if you don't
realistically,
have concept, if you don't have concept, this is not a question that you should really be worried about.
what this comes down to, Carrie, is when we renew our insurance or we get our insurance or we get our policies, is that we flag those particular questions, like look through the policy and find the places that we really need to have an explanation of what is a professional. If there's something that says a professional has to do it, find out who that professional is. At the same time, we get the policy or sign up for the policy so we know. Let's just think ahead, know your policy. And you know, that tiny print. Yeah. It's hard to read sometimes, but you got to read through it and figure it out. Now, here we have the question. Challenge of insuring older proven boats. And that is David Dick again.
Yeah, actually, so my webinar last week was about older boats in particular, and the challenge with older boats is not only proving their value, but proving the maintenance and the due diligence that you're doing on your boat as a prudent owner. whether you have insurance or not, it's something you should be doing regardless, because if you ever have a suit brought against you and you can't prove that you did everything possible for the good of the general public as well as yourself to mitigate a potential fire or loss, then you may find yourself, facing some legal challenges. But older boats. Well, first of all, let's define an older boat. An older boat, as it pertains to the Caribbean, is anything over 10 years. From an underwriting perspective, do I think it's an older boat? No. But from an underwriting perspective, anything over 10 years, you're going to find survey requirements. If anyone is in that situation and they either are worried about getting their insurance dropped or canceled, or they may want to shop their insurance. You can't shop your insurance with an older boat without a new survey. We have a survey guide that gives you tips and tricks. We have a survey firm that we recommend in the Caribbean. There's liability connected to referring anyone for any service, but in the Caribbean, it's the Wild West. You're going to find a little bit of everything. So if you do need a survey, there is a surveying firm, a group of surveyors that insurance companies tend to use the most, and they're very trusted and ethical. And I would direct you to them, and they're just a really great group of people. So reach out to me separately for that, and I'd be happy to pass that on. Some insurance companies for older boats will require that you survey it on a consistent basis. So maybe every 2 years or every 3 years. So when you buy your new insurance policy, you should ask that question: when will I have to get a new survey? The answer may change from year to year, so make sure you're asking that question every year. Now, if you're in the US or you're with a market that just has incidental Caribbean coverage, like for example, if you have your home is insured with Hanover Insurance will write they will insure boats in the Caribbean as long as you're not going there during hurricane season. They'll allow you to go the rest of the year. And they're pretty reasonable in their rates. The navigation's very broad. And if that's the case, it's important to know what their survey requirements are, but they may not look at it as strictly. They may just require that, you have a survey every 5 years or every 10 years. But the US consensus is that, an older boat is defined as 26 years of age or older. I've insured some extremely old boats and, older than me. I'm not going to tell you how old that is, but Joan knows, and it's old enough. I have lots of grandkids, but there are boats older than me that have insurance, and they have good insurance. And, we manage the expectations going into it. They keep their receipts and their repair and maintenance records, not only on paper, but more important, they keep it online. So, you ever have a fire or you have water intrusion of any kind or mold, you're not worried about the paper getting compromised because you'll have to provide that backup. But with those really older boats, we've had to get surveys sometimes every year. So it's possible, but you have to know that if you're buying an older boat, you have to factor in the expense, not just of getting the survey, but also with complying with the surveyor recommendations. So if you have a surveyor that you don't see eye to eye on, and you want to, debate whether something should be a recommendation or not, I'm going to tell you up front that unfortunately, every single insurance market views the surveyors as God. Whatever they say is gospel, and they will never dispute it, debate it, make exceptions for it. If your survey says you have to, put a propane tank in a compartment, you have to do it. So I'm looking at this other question. I'm gonna laugh in a minute, but yeah, so I don't know if I've answered that question. Old boat insurance is possible on most boats, as long as you understand going into it that, well, look, this is a love affair. You're going to pay for the survey, you're going to pay for the recommendations, and you're going to baby that boat. But yeah, the logo we have, the B, my husband, he'll probably be rolling his eyes if he has to hear this. We have a B. We have a B following our boat in the logo. We have a B. Everything we have has a B. So, we kind of look at our competition this way. this is a bee specifically that, you know, if they sting, they don't die, they regrow their stinger back. We were very specific in this. One of our grown kids had a art collection in the North Carolina State Legislature building, and she was asked to do a collection that was non-political, and she chose bees. We're the bottom of the food chain, but we're the most important part of the food chain. And we produce the most babies. We, we are so busy. And I don't know if you've ever studied bees, but they have a hormone they emit that makes everything around the bee work harder. So that's kind of how I view it. If you see us at the boat shows, we're likely standing up or engaging, we're giving out things, and we do a lot with Hope Fleet. So that kind of goes along with our theme. But thanks for asking. I don't get that question very often.
We have another question here. Well, two of them. First will be insurance on boats.
Yeah. So it is absolutely possible to purchase liability only. Would I recommend it? Not usually. Not if you're going to the Caribbean. If you're going to the Caribbean, you're probably going to save 10 or 20% on your premium by purchasing liability only. And unfortunately, if you're going liability only, you still have to get a survey because they want to know your boat is seaworthy. It's still a condition in the policy that the boat is maintained and kept in a seaworthy condition. So I don't recommend it. If you have a small boat and you're in the United States, Bahamas area, and when I say small, I'm talking about under 150,000, maybe under 35 feet. Certainly look at liability only, but if you're going to the Caribbean, which was really the focus of this webinar, I would not recommend buying liability only. The problem with it from an underwriting perspective, just to kind of go with this theme of giving you the inside view of our industry, is that if you're buying liability only, then you're not viewed by underwriters as a good risk because they think you don't care about your boat and your investment. So I guess it's still the proverbial, it depends, but I don't usually recommend it for the Caribbean.
And we still have one question about insurance on boats with lithium batteries. And then Linda Potts has a question too. That's a big deal too.
Lithium batteries. Why am I not seeing that one? But
chat.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it, but I can talk about lithium batteries all day long. There are, it's really important, even if your insurance application doesn't say, do you have lithium? Make sure that you tell your agent or your underwriter that you have lithium. And I have been in Nigel Calder's classes and helped with his Q&A sessions on lithium in particular. There's a lot of arguments with insurance underwriters about whether, lithium iron phosphate is a better risk than lithium ion. But let me tell you, if there's a lithium fire, it doesn't matter whether it's on a scooter, a bike, a hoverboard, a bunch of phones, like that dive incident. Was it Conception in California? It doesn't matter if it's your lithium battery on your boat. Unfortunately, the news puts out that there's a lithium fire, and underwriters read that, or maybe an underwriter was with a company that paid out on a lithium claim, and the narrative is not controlled. So the result of that is not necessarily an intelligent result. It's the result of a narrative not being controlled. Someone heard there was a lithium fire, and there was no flashlight on whether or not that lithium battery was OEM, aftermarket, whether it was professionally installed with a BMS system recommended by Nigel Calder, or whether someone got it off eBay from somewhere in China. There's no way to differentiate that on insurance. So if you have, companies like Markel, you probably don't have coverage for lithium batteries of any kind. Make sure you read your policy. But on the same token, there are many companies whereby they may unknowingly insure your boat without knowing that it's lithium. Because if you have a boat that is produced and built with lithium, they would not write that boat for that reason. So it's important to know that if it's not the intent of your insurance to underwrite and insure lithium, then you might have some challenges during a claim. So it really isn't a lithium question as much as it is a, you know, making sure that you're disclosing all material facts in writing to your insurance provider. Material facts. Misrepresenting or omitting a material fact is fraud in many places. It's a crime. So make sure you have that conversation in writing with your agent. So, love affair of an older boat. Someone has a beautiful boat, solid as a battleship, faster than any of her slipmates, that is headed back to the Bahamas in the next year or so. So hopefully, before you go back to the Bahamas, you're going to reach out to Hope Fleet, because they have a lot of projects going on in the Abacos in particular and some other places. And they've got some just really kindred people on the ground who are trying to rebuild infrastructure, even from storms all the way back to Dorian. So, but yeah, if you're trying to do anything with batteries, with engines, with fire extinguishers, and you're in the Bahamas or the Caribbean, you've got some challenges. So, you know, people say, well, what do I do? There's no way around it. We can't find someone to do this repair, to find this part. We're in the Caribbean where we can't even buy lettuce, you know, what do? Well, you know, unfortunately, my recommendation is not an answer you're going to want to hear, but what you can do is go back to the US to take care of that issue, or go without insurance until you can take care of it, until you can come back to the US. And you know, the challenge is then making sure you've done your research to figure out where you can haul out without being required to have insurance.
Yeah, I would say on the lithium batteries, Carrie, down in Melbourne in mid-November, Scott Burke's going to be down there talking lithium batteries. I think it might be very interesting to pair you with Scott on the insurance side, where he's the ABYC and a surveyor.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting pairing, let me say. Also, Nigel Caller is going to be at the Chesapeake Gam, and that's the end of September up at Maryland Yacht Club. And Scott will be there, I think, also probably talking on the battery issue. It's a big deal for everyone. And of course, the boat show will all be at the boat show.
Yeah.
Potts has a comment. For those cruisers who are willing to assume all or most of their own risk, are there insurance plans in the Caribbean that provide coverage that allows calling out for hurricane season at marina?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. It's like you're really fuzzy like underwater. So I'm trying to find this question because
Let me
I'm
do
not.
this. Now, can you hear me better?
Yes, whatever you do. Okay,
Okay.
and I just found it, so I apologize for that. Okay, so if you're, you know, I am all about self-insurance. And if you're going to self-insure, reach out to me and you know, stay in touch with me. I'm happy to be a resource for you. I have a good idea of, you know, ways to work around it, but I'm going to tell you, even if you buy insurance, you should be acting as if you were self-insuring anyway. The problem is, you know, people rely on insurance for things that, you know, you wouldn't rely on for your car. You wouldn't rely on warranty work for your car, on your car insurance, but people do it on boats. But you're asking about insurance plans in the Caribbean for haul out liability only. You know, the marinas and boatyards only require liability. So you can certainly do that. And if you're, like I said, if you're staying in the Caribbean, there are about 8 markets that are reputable in the Caribbean through brokers that we don't partner with, but we have vetted them and we know they're honest and ethical. And if you reach out to me separately, I can certainly introduce you to those people. We don't get anything back for it. It's just a public service we offer. So if you're hauling out in the Caribbean for the season and you're staying in the Caribbean, that would be a great option for you to get liability only from one of their markets. So let me just see if I answered all. Okay, I think we have answered all the questions, and we're getting close to 8 o'clock. So
yes.
Joan, now that I can hear you better, do you want to talk a little bit more about the SSCA GAMS? I think so. This is the one we're going to be at where we're speaking, but isn't there
right?
another GAM coming up as well?
Yes, and it's just before the Cruisers University. It's at the
Okay.
Maryland Yacht Club in Pasadena, Maryland. Wonderful anchorage. Slips are there. Good rate. There's a wonderful parking lot. And we intend to take our boat up and have it there and then drive the boat show from there. That's the plan. But anyway, it is the last September 20, I think it's 26th, 27th, 28th, the last weekend um,
Of September.
in September. And
Yeah.
Nigel Calder is going to be there. I mean, this is an opportunity. We don't know how long we'll have Nigel able to come to our events. And we've got Cruising with Couples seminars on Thursday, which is an all-day event, CCY type seminars. We have just a wonderful group of speakers, and we will have some of us will be installing HAL and working on ships modules and whatnot, showing people how to use that. Basically, HAL is a little handheld that gets the government coast pilots, the local aids to mariners, the lights and buoys, and brings them all up in one spot fused so you can see the port you're going into with just a kind of a captain snapshot as you go in. And it runs on ChatGPT. It's free, and it runs on free ChatGPT. It's been a labor of love to build this thing. It's a little operating system that runs inside the cloud with the AI engines. Anyway, could you share a little bit, just a minute or two, talk about Beryl and the insurance situation down that you saw afterwards down with Beryl, because that was a mess.
That really was a mess, and there's only so much that I can do. I was involved with many groups that unfortunately, I mean, they weren't my customers, but we were just doing it as a public service, but they were in boat pileups, or they were held, basically, I don't have a better way to put it, held hostage in marinas or boat yards because they couldn't get out because there were boats in front of them that had toppled over, what have you. And then the other challenge was, the services that are available in the Caribbean are limited. So, salvage companies would come in to a specific area that had been hit, and instead of charging, $3,000 to launch a boat or upright it, they were charging, 5-digit figures for uprighting a boat or launching it into the water. And, a lot of people felt very taken advantage of. In most jurisdictions of the world, salvage rights are in favor of the whoever is doing the rescuing or the salvage work. So they have the right and the ability to charge whatever they want. And in situations like that, where it's time sensitive, you're going to see an exorbitant bill. Sometimes insurance companies don't want to pay the bill. And so it's really important to know that when you sign up for insurance, you're not just signing up for a transaction once a year, but you're signing up with an agent who will be your advocate if you ever do need to file a claim. And sadly, we jumped in and helped as advocates for many, many boat owners after Hurricane Beryl, who basically just stuck in the Caribbean because couldn't repair their boat, couldn't get contractors in, couldn't get a salvage company come in and upright it, or they had another boat on top of it and that boat had bad insurance and wouldn't resolve it. And so that boat insurance said, you can't move your boat until we move ours. And, so the message after Hurricane Beryl wasn't really one of insurance rights and responsibilities as much as it was just, sometimes we just have to put on that hat of diplomacy and kindness and working through it together and persevering with patience and great articulation with insurance companies, adjusters, salvage companies, and surveyors. So, sometimes when, for example, I knew there were a lot of boat owners in the Caribbean that weren't getting their claims paid because of some of the providers they chose, and they didn't read their policy until they had a claim. So, they came to me and wanted to know how can we resolve this? And unfortunately, with those providers, you can't resolve it. There's no appeal process. There's no accountability for those providers. So it was really a matter of trying to get in the middle of 5 boat owners, get them to talk to each other about resources and to negotiate with the salvage companies and the providers that were coming in. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit on that whole topic. It was pretty heart-wrenching, and I know there's still boats there that are still damaged from Hurricane Beryl, and here we are going through another hurricane season. So I'm not trying to open up an old wound. If you need advice on a specific Hurricane Beryl claim, one thing I will say is that if you need advice on it right now and your insurance company hasn't responded, insurance companies are held to a timeline. As long as they're not one of those providers I talked about earlier, they have to respond to claims in a certain timeline. But that being said, if they can't find a salver in the area and you can't find a salvage company in the area, then then we're talking about diplomacy and creative, innovative solutions. And that was certainly something that we got involved with, was the innovative part of it, to bring in solutions to really possible scenarios where I could look at a application, supporting documentation, and an insurance policy, and I could candidly tell a boat owner, I'm really sorry, I know you have a $700,000 boat, but you have no coverage because of what you agreed to in your fine print. And so here are your options. Here's what you can do. And so, yeah, sorry, Joan, it was a little bit heart-wrenching going through that. Hopefully we don't have any more storms. I really appreciate that SSCA puts out this message on a regular basis to consumers to read the fine print. Caveat emptor, buyer beware, make sure that you're reading your contracts, because like I said, insurance is not your friend. We're not a good neighbor. You're not in good hands. You just signed a contract, and it's a matter of whether or not the contract is going to be honored or not. It has nothing to do with warm fuzzies about neighbors and friends and all that jazz.
Nope, it's business, and it can be difficult. Carrie, thank you so much. I think this was a very useful conversation to have. Does anyone, we have some participants here, Al Lima. Hi, Al. And,
hi, Al.
And Cecile and David J.
We love Al Lima. If you're buying a boat, yep, you need to call Al Lima. He knows boats inside out.
We have Richard Marsh. We have our treasurer, our secretary, Michael Oberlin is there. Well, we got some interesting, this is so nice to see friends listening. Really appreciate that. And Carrie, thank you so much. We will see you at, if not sooner, at the Annapolis Boat Show, Saturday AM breakfast brunch is on you.
So Saturday AM, when the boat show opens, we cater local exotic coffee and fresh pastries from, is it called Chicken Ruth's? Gosh, they have like apple fritters the size of dinner plates. So anyway, if you have more questions, or you just want to hang out with us Saturday morning at the boat show.
We're getting thanks here. Clap, clap, clap. And thank you for sharing. And we appreciate that. Carrie, again, thank you. And this is recorded. This will be up on the SSCA website. It will be posted on Facebook. If you would like the slides, we could send those out as well. But I think the discussion that you had talking about the different questions, especially the questions on lithium batteries and fire extinguishers, looking at the fine print, I think that's all something that everyone needs to be reminded of, whether they are new or old boat owners. So thank you very much. I thank everyone for attending, and we'll do this again next month. We have Aquamaps talking about some of their new products, their routing product. We have a medical team is going to be coming on September 18th and talking over medical insurance, medical, I think, medication, I think. And Aquamaps will be on either November or September 10th or 11th. So thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon, Carrie. And enjoy your picture of Hal.
Thank you. Take
You're
care.
right. Good night.
Bye now.
Good night.